So every generation gets told the same thing. Just get through this and life will be easier. A recession, a financial crisis, a pandemic, and now AI. And I've heard some version of that promise for most of my adult life. Now the strange thing is, normal never seems to come back. And I don't think that's just an accident. You see, when I was younger, I had this idea of how things were supposed to go. Like, for example, study, get a job, work steadily, save a bit, and at some point, life would start to feel easier. That was more or less the deal, or at least that's how it was presented to me. Now, for a while, I actually believed that, and I think that most of us do. But somewhere along the way, I started to notice something. There is always a reason why things are supposedly harder right now. Like I said, a recession, a housing crisis, a financial crash, a pandemic, and now it's AI. And each time the message is basically the same. These are difficult times, so everyone has to work a bit harder, adjust a bit more, hold on a little longer. And after hearing some version of that sentence for most of my adult life, I stopped believing it was really about any particular crisis. I think the crisis is just whatever happens to be in the news that year. The underlying thing being asked of us doesn't really change. I don't have a clean answer for what to do with all of this, but I just wanted to think through it out loud because it's been sitting with me for a while now. If I look at what's happening right now, it's not hard to see why people feel sort of stretched. Housing costs have gone up in a way that feels almost surreal compared to a couple of decades ago. Food costs more, rent keeps climbing, and for a lot of people, owning a home feels less like a milestone and more like a lottery ticket. Now, I know people working 2 jobs, and I know at least one person working 3 jobs. Not because they're trying to get ahead in life, but because, from what I can tell, it's more that they're trying to not fall behind. Oh, and by the way, if any of this resonates with you, consider subscribing. More videos like this are coming. And now we have the AI on top of everything else. People are worried about their jobs, about entire industries changing shape, and I understand that worry. I feel some version of it myself, if I'm honest here. But at some point, I remember that I just stopped reading headlines and I started looking a bit further back, and a pattern started to emerge that I hadn't really noticed before. You see, I've noticed that every generation seems to have had its defining hardship. For some, it was war. For others, it was inflation or oil shortages or a financial crash or a pandemic. And now we have AI. The specific reason, it just keeps changing, but the underlying pressure doesn't really seem to let up, And the message stays oddly consistent. It's always, things are difficult, so we need to sacrifice a bit more. What stuck me even more was thinking about all the technology that was supposed to fix all this. The Industrial Revolution, electricity, the personal computer, the internet, the smartphone, and now, apparently, AI. Each one arrived with this promise, more or less spoken or unspoken, that life would become easier, more efficient, more free time. Now, in some ways, that is true. We are, by most measures, we're more productive than any generation before us. And I see a version of this play out constantly in my own work. Like a new system gets introduced, a better process, a smarter tool, something that's supposed to make things run more efficiently. And it usually does exactly what it says. It makes things more efficient. But efficiency doesn't translate into free time. It just gets converted into more work. Now, how is that possible? It seems like the bar moves up quietly and nobody announces that it moved. And yet a lot of people I know still feel like they're barely keeping their head above water. Buying a home feels harder, not easier. Saving anything meaningful feels harder. Getting out of the whole, paycheck to paycheck cycle feels, for a lot of people, like it's slipping further away rather than closer. Now, I don't fully understand how both of those things can be true at once. More productivity, more technology, and yet somehow not more breathing room. But it seems to be the case. And another thing that I've noticed, almost by accident, is that the idea of enough doesn't seem to stay in one place. There was a time, not that long ago actually, when a single income could support an entire family. Now it often takes two incomes to get somewhere close to the same results. It used to be enough to just have a job. Now there is this quiet expectation to keep learning new things, stay, reachable after hours, reply to messages at night, sit through meetings on the screen, maybe build some kind of personal brand or a side project on top of everything else. And the finish line, if there ever really was one, seems to just keep moving. And this is the part that isn't in the recession headlines. Now, my wife and I, we actually spend very little compared to what we earn. We save more than we spend every single month on paper. But the number we manage to save has been shrinking these last couple of years. Even with our salaries going up, that should be mathematically possible, because we budget every month. We go over the same spreadsheet. And looking at it now, something is clearly off, and I still can't fully explain where it's all going. The biggest piece of it, if I'm being honest, is the mortgage. Right? The single biggest financial decision I ever made, and probably my biggest mistake. Owning a home is supposed to be the responsible thing, but paying it off for the next 20-something years is its own kind of trap. It's part of why I still haven't jumped into my own business with both feet. Walking away from a paycheck feels different when there is a mortgage sitting behind you. Now, technology was supposed to buy us time. Instead, in a strange way, it seems to have let work follow us home. The office now fits in a pocket. Notifications don't really respect the idea of a workday ending when you leave the building. And maybe the pattern that unsettles me the most is that this idea that once this particular crisis passes, things will go back to normal. I've heard that sentiment my whole life in different forms, about different crises, but normal never comes back. It never arrives. One thing ends and something else begins, which makes me wonder if maybe the question isn't how do we get through this current thing so much as what would it mean to depend a little less on all of this over time. Now, I don't say that this is the answer. It's more of a question that I keep returning to, because it seems like history doesn't only repeat problems, it also seems to repeat something else. Chances to see things a little differently if you're paying attention. Whenever something changes dramatically, I notice that most people's attention goes toward what's being lost. And it's understandable, right? But there always seems to be a smaller group of people looking at what might be opening up instead. The Industrial Revolution, it wiped out a lot of jobs.